In the year 1999, Elaine Nix was an 18-year-old resident of Gainesville, Georgia. She lived with her family and aspired to be a nurse and mother one day. Despite her tiny 5 foot 2 inches stature, she had a lively personality that lit up any room. She had a boyfriend named Billy, who lived 30 miles away in Cleveland. Being a typical teenager, she had wrapped up a considerably large phone bill of $75 in a month after contacting him every day. Fed up with large phone bills, her mother decided to place a block on long-distance calls from their line and explained to Elaine that she would need to make other arrangements in reaching him. Unperturbed by this restriction, Elaine started driving to nearby Zach's Food Rack to use their payphone, which only cost 35 cents for unlimited talk time. The couple got into a routine whereby Elaine would call around about 11 PM and they'll talk for about an hour, after which time she'll drive back home. On the 20th of September, Elaine spoke to Billy about an upcoming camping trip. When they hung up, Billy assumed Elaine would have driven back home as per usual. Unfortunately, Elaine never made it back. At around 2 AM, a deputy on patrol found Elaine's 1986 Toyota Celica lying dormant in the parking lot of the convenience store next to the payphone, but nobody was in sight. Out of curiosity, the officer decided to investigate. The car window was wound down. The hood of the vehicle was still relatively warm. The keys were in the ignition, and a purse and cigarettes were in the back seat, all of which belonged to Elaine. Beside this oddity, the cop didn't investigate any further and drove off, continuing his night shift. Her parents weren't overly concerned at first, since Elaine frequently stayed over with friends and family instead of driving home. However, when the daughter didn't show up for work the following day, they knew something was wrong. Driving past Zach's Food Rack, they noticed her car in the parking lot. Elaine's mother drove the car home, unwittingly destroying potential evidence. For 8 long days, those closest to Elaine scouted the area in search for clues that could lead to the whereabouts of Elaine. They trudged through the nearby woods and walked up and down the highway. Investigators questioned Elaine's family and friends and checked surveillance footage from the convenience store. While looking over the footage, they saw a dark-coloured truck driving near the area of Elaine's last known location, yet nothing more substantial came from the footage. Unfortunately, however, it showed nothing that could point investigators or Elaine's family in the right direction. On the 29th of September, somebody cutting grass behind an industrial park had smelt something pungent wafting in the air. Following the scent with his nose, he made a grisly discovery. Elaine's naked and badly decomposed body was lying there, just inside a tree line. She had been killed and dumped 17 miles from the payphone she frequented. The autopsy determined that she hadn't been shot, stabbed or beaten. It's believed that she was either strangled or smothered. The exact cause of her death was never established given the state of decay of her body. The body was quickly identified as Elaine via dental records and what remained of the frog tattoo on her ankle and butterfly tattoo on her lower back. The area where the payphone Elaine was using that night, as well as the area her body was later discovered, are both easy drives off Interstate 95. Moreover, the location of the payphone is a very popular spot for truckers to pull up and stop and get some shut-eye before continuing on their journey. This led many to theorise that Elaine could have been killed by a trucker, and her death may have been sexually motivated, or Elaine could have witnessed a drug deal while on the payphone and she was abducted and murdered to keep her quiet. Without many leads to go on, the case went cold and Elaine's murder still remains unsolved today. Her family still hold hope that Elaine's slaying will one day be solved.
On the 7th of January 1982, 29-year-old Bobbie Oberholtzer's body was found dumped near a scenic lookout 5 miles south of Breckenridge, Colorado, after being shot twice. A cross-country skier came across the grisly find when she discovered the lifeless body face up in the snow, 6 meters down an embankment. Her house keys were found at the scene, along with an orange sock. However, the sock did not belong to her. 6 months later, police found the body of 21-year-old Annette Schnee in a creek near a side road of the highway 13 miles away. She had also been shot to death. Incredibly, police discovered that she was wearing the match to the orange sock. The women had vanished on the same day, the 6th of January. Police were certain that the women were murdered on the same night by the same individual. They believed that the killer most likely lost Annette's sock after he killed Bobbie. The prime suspect in the case was Bobbie's husband, Jeff. However, he maintained his innocence. They married on the 1st of July, 1977. He ran an appliance repair business while she worked as a receptionist in Breckenridge. They lived in Alma, 14 miles away. According to him, the day that she vanished started out as a normal day. She left at around 7:15 a.m. and hitchhiked to work. At 6:20 p.m., she called and told him that she was out with friends and would be home in a few hours. He asked if she wanted him to pick her up, but she told him that she would get a ride home. Jeff made dinner and waited for Bobbie to come home. At some point, he fell asleep. He woke up around midnight and discovered that she had not returned. He waited for her until after 2 a.m. when the bars closed. When she still had not returned, he began searching. He learned from her friends that she left the bar at 7:30 p.m. They assumed that she had gotten a ride home. He tried to report her missing but was told that it was too early to file a report. He decided to go home and wait for her. The following morning, a farmer who lived 30 miles outside of Breckenridge found Bobbie's license. Jeff and 2 friends went to pick it up. On the way, he spotted something blue in an otherwise empty field. It was her backpack, which she always had with her. A bloody glove and a clump of tissues were found with it. Jeff's friends started a search for her. 2 hours later, her body was found, 15 miles from where her backpack was found. Strangely, police only found Bobbie's footprints at the scene of the crime. A plastic cord was tied around one of her wrists, suggesting that it seemed likely she escaped as her captor was attempting to tie her wrists together. She had a gunshot wound in her chest, the severity of which suggested she was shot and killed at close range. The same day her body was found, Annette was reported missing. She was a cocktail waitress from Frisco, Colorado. She also hitchhiked to and from work. Because of the similarities, the 2 cases were immediately connected by police. They questioned Jeff about her. At first, he denied knowing her. However, after seeing her picture on the news, he recalled meeting her once. He claimed that he had picked her up one day and gave her his business card. He denied any involvement in her disappearance or Bobbie's death. 6 months later, on the 3rd of July, 1982, her body was found. Jeff's business card and the orange sock that matched the one found with Bobbie were also located. The same evening that Bobbie went for drinks with her work friends, Annette visited a local farmery in Breckenridge to fill a prescription at around 4 p.m. She was in deep conversation with a young unidentified dark-haired woman. Annette was overheard reminding the woman to buy cigarettes and was never seen alive again. A composite sketch was completed and widely distributed. However, nobody ever identified who this mystery woman was. Annette was supposed to work at a bar at 8 p.m. that night. Police believe that she left Breckenridge at around 5 p.m. to hitchhike back home to get ready. The killer picked her up and drove her 20 miles south of Breckenridge. He took her down a small, dead-end road, where he sexually assaulted her in his car. While she was putting her clothes back on, she forgot to put on her orange sock and attempted to escape. He then shot her in the back, leaving her body in the snow. Almost 6 months later, in a remote mountain valley area, a 9-year-old boy was fishing and stumbled upon her frozen and lifeless body. Although there was a bullet hole through her back and out her chest, no bullet was ever recovered. She was disheveled, but fully clothed. Her items of apparel were unusual, though. Both her shoes were on, but she was wearing odd socks. A brown and blue striped knee-high sock was on her right foot, with the pair found in the pocket of her hoodie, while her left foot wore an orange ankle sock. Investigators realized it was an exact match for the one found with the body of Bobbie Oberholtzer. The connection between the two murders were clear, and they were certain the same killer was responsible for both women's deaths. The media quickly dubbed the crimes the Orange Sock Murders. Annette's backpack was recovered along the side of the road, and it contained an interesting photograph of a man in his late 20s to early 30s, squinting at the camera. None of Annette's family or friends had seen this man before, and nobody was ever able to identify who he was. The killer then apparently returned to Breckenridge, where he picked up Bobbie. He then drove her to the scenic lookout, where he tried to rape her. However, she apparently fought back and tried to escape his vehicle. As she attempted to escape, the orange sock fell out of his vehicle. It was then that she shot twice as she escaped over a snow embankment at the side of the highway. She bled to death in the deep snow. Jeff later took a polygraph test and passed, but his alibi for that night could not be confirmed. He continued to maintain his innocence. He claimed to have been hanging at his house with a friend while he waited for Bobbie to come home. But his friend had left the area and couldn't be tracked down until December 1990, close to 9 years after the murder. The man then confirmed he had spent some time at Oberholtzer's house that evening, but the times he provided didn't match those given by Jeff. For years, the blood found on Bobbie's gloves and the tissues with her backpack was believed to have belonged to her. However, in the early 1990s, DNA testing determined that it came from a male. The testing also determined that Jeff's DNA wasn't a match. As a result of this and other evidence, including several alibi witnesses, he was eventually cleared as a suspect in the murders. However, the killer has never been caught. Police have since looked into several other suspects in the case. One was a cab driver, Thomas Luther, who beat and raped a hitchhiker after picking her up in Breckenridge in February 1982. While in jail, he allegedly bragged about being responsible for the murders. He also failed 2 lie detector tests when questioned. Investigators learned from his girlfriend that he did not come home the night of the murders. He also did not show up for work the day before and after them. When questioned, he lied and said he was at work. However, his DNA was not found at the scene. Despite this, investigators have looked into the possibility that he had an accomplice whose DNA was at the scene. The other suspect was Tracy Petrocelli, who shot his fiancée to death in Seattle, Washington, in October 1981, and then went on a multi-state crime spree. During this time, he stayed at the Holiday Inn in Frisco, which was where Annette worked. Although the DNA at the crime scene did not match him, investigators noted that he often picked up male hitchhikers which he used as accomplices for his crimes. He was believed to have killed these accomplices. It was possible that the DNA belonged to them. Despite the suspects, investigators believed that the killer was someone else who was familiar with the rural road where Annette's body was discovered. In January 2015, investigators asked the public for help with it, but it appears that there have been no new leads in the case. The case remains unsolved.
51-year-old Dan Short was the president of the local bank in Knoll, Missouri. At 8 a.m. on the morning of the 6th of October 1989, one of his employees arrived at work and discovered the vault wide open with $70,000 missing. The FBI and 2 separate police agencies initiated an investigation. They located 2 .45 caliber shell casings on the floor. When they tried to contact Dan, they were unsuccessful. As a result, he became the first suspect. However, the investigation changed on the 11th of October after Dan's body was found taped to a chair and floating in Grand Lake, 20 miles from the bank. He had apparently been dropped in the water while he was still alive. The police were now not only searching for robbers, but also murderers. Investigators found that when Dan became president in 1983, the local economy was in bad shape. He had to balance the needs of the local people with the bank's need to turn a profit. In the process, he alienated a few people. Some individuals had their belongings repossessed and their credit declined. However, he was friendly with most of his customers and appeared to have no enemies. Dan lived in an isolated home 8 miles from town. On the night of the robbery, on the 5th of October, he had a guest over his house who left at around 11 p.m. Investigators believe that the killers abducted him between 11 p.m. and 1:30 a.m. from his house, most likely at gunpoint. They believe that he and the killers arrived at the bank around 2 a.m. and that they forced him to turn off the alarm and unlock the doors. They damaged the security cameras and then forced him to open the vault. In the end, they took $70,000 in there. However, they left behind at least $100,000 that Dan was also aware of, which they apparently did not know about. Witnesses heard one of the assailants shooting at one of the cameras at around 3 a.m. A few minutes later, 3 vehicles were seen by a trucker. The first vehicle was believed to have been Dan's red pickup truck. The second vehicle was a blue pickup truck that later passed the trucker. At a certain point, they ditched Dan's pickup truck and placed him in a van and in the kitchen chair with weights attached. Authorities believe that he was unconscious but alive at the time he was thrown into the river due to the fact that he was not gagged. The chair was also fragile, with him held in it by duct tape, which showed no apparent signs of an attempt to break free, even though he could have if he was conscious. Witnesses saw a dark van on the bridge, which they believe he was thrown from, at about 6 a.m, but it sped off before they could obtain a license plate number. The killers remain at large. The only possible suspects the investigators could think of were that killers may have been people who were angered with the bank and had taken it out with Dan. He had denied several people credit, so it was theorised that one of these people were involved in the murder. Another theory was that Dan stumbled upon something suspicious at the bank, either money laundering or some other illegal activity, and was silenced, with the robbery as a cover-up. A witness spotted a medium blue Chevy pickup truck near Dan's red one around the time of the murder. In it, there was a heavy-set white male with long brown hair and a beard. 1 week before the murder, the Chevy and its driver were sighted at a local gas station by the same witness that would later see them on the night of the murder. The witness noticed that the truck had a white toolbox on the back and had an Oklahoma license plate. The Chevy was seen again near Dan's home just 4 days before his murder. He had told his brother that he felt like he was being staked out, and on one occasion, his home was actually broken into. Because of this information, investigators believe that the killers planned everything in advance. The case was solved in March of 1992, when brothers Shannon and Joseph Agofsky were arrested and charged with robbery in Dan's murder. They'd been suspected since the beginning of the investigation. Shortly after the murder, Shannon had allegedly bragged to friends that he was the richest teenager in the country, presumably due to the robbery. Investigators discovered that they owned .45 caliber firearms. However, their parents claimed that they were at home at the time of the murder, so they weren't considered as suspects. A few days after the murder, a wad of duct tape was found on the shore of the river that Dan's body was found in. Forensic and chemical testing determined it came from the same roll that was used to tie him to the chair. 4 fingerprints found on it were matched to Shannon. Investigators looked further into the Agofsky brothers and discovered they had been spending large amounts of money in the months following the murder, even though they were unemployed. A witness also identified a chain hoist found with Dan's body as one he had left at the Agofsky home. Sheila Agofsky, their mother, also owned a brown van, similar to the one seen on the bridge on the night of the murder. The brothers had talked to friends about abducting a banker and asking for blueprints of the bank. Furthermore, inmates claimed that Shannon and Joseph had confessed to robbing the bank and murdering Dan. In September of 1992, Shannon and Joseph were convicted of robbery and sentenced to life in prison. In 1997, Shannon was convicted of Dan's murder and given another life sentence. Joseph's murder trial ended in a hung jury. Prosecutors decided not to retry him since he was already serving a life sentence for the robbery. In March of 2013, Joseph died in prison from unknown causes at the age of 46. Shannon is now on death row for the 2001 murder of a fellow prison inmate.
Gail DeLano was born on the 4th of December 1950 in Huntingdale Station, New York. She was one of 3 children growing up. The 35-year-old was a twice-divorced single mother of 2 teenage boys. She lived in Wiscasset, Maine, and sought companionship through newspaper personal ads, describing herself as outgoing. On the 21st of June 1986, she went to meet a date at a local restaurant when she suddenly vanished. Her friends and family wondered if she met with foul play or engineered her own disappearance. The day before she vanished, her sons overheard her having a 2-hour phone conversation with a man named John, who they assumed she met through the personal ads. The next morning, she told her sons that she would meet the man at the Howard Johnson's restaurant later that day in Brunswick, and hopefully spend the afternoon with him. When Gail's son Ryan returned home later that evening, he discovered that his mother wasn't home. The next day, when she still hadn't come back, her family contacted the police. Gail's vehicle was found abandoned at the restaurant, and at first, authorities did not suspect foul play. Gail would sometimes spend the night with her friends or dates, so it was assumed that she would eventually come home. Her family, however, were convinced that she had met with foul play. When Gail's car was searched, nothing of interest was found. 2 hours later, a worker at the restaurant found a set of keys in the parking lot. 2 weeks after that, a 9-year-old boy found Gail's purse in the bushes of the restaurant. Although the purse appeared to be untouched, there was no money in it, which was strange because Gail had always kept $50 in her wallet. After this discovery, police began to suspect foul play. Gail kept a diary that expressed her loneliness and the need to share her life with a man. It also recorded details of dates she went on. Detectives questioned the men she had gone out with in the past year. All of the men had alibis for the time of her disappearance, including a man named John. This man was not believed to be the man that Gail was going on a date with. Despite keeping records of all the men she had contact with, Gail, for unknown reasons, had not recorded her date John's full name or personal information. A new theory emerged when police interviewed a radio DJ named Kristen Roy, who said that Gail had called the station multiple times prior to her disappearance. And he felt that she was suffering from depression. Authorities suspected that Gail may have disappeared and committed suicide. She had spoken to her sister about taking her own life. Her family considered it a possibility, but did not believe that she would do that to her family. Gail's family began distributing missing person flyers with truckers. 1 year after Gail vanished, a trucker named John Scott recognized her photograph as a woman whom he had given a ride to months earlier. The trucker noticed she was in possession of some pill bottles, but did not know what was in them. He was certain that the woman he had given the ride to was Gail, especially because of her northern accent. This led authorities to believe that Gail may have contrived her own disappearance for unknown reasons. Her family and friends, however, were uncertain if she would have been able to disappear successfully and remain hidden for so many years. Her mother started thinking that she was suffering from amnesia, wandering around aimlessly without knowing her identity. They just wanted to know what happened to her and make sure that she was okay. Initially, the man named John, whom Gail was supposed to go on a date with, was considered a possible suspect, but he remained unidentified. Finally, after more than 2 years, the case was solved. Sadly, it was discovered that Gail committed suicide in a Mobile, Alabama hotel while registered under the false name of Jackie Stafford within a few days of disappearing. After a televised broadcast on Unsolved Mysteries on the 5th of October 1988, a coroner who had been watching it noticed the similarities to a woman he found in the hotel 2 years earlier and rang the call center. Forensic DNA tests confirmed her identity a fortnight later. Police pieced together her movements and said that after leaving her house, Gail drove to the restaurant, took all of her personal belongings out of her purse, discarded it, left the keys in the wheel well of her car, and then made her way to the Mobile, Alabama. There, She went to the hotel and registered herself under the name Jackie Stafford before going to her hotel room and overdosing on prescription medication. A memorial service was held for her on the 11th of November, 1988.
On the 23rd of November 1997, Marlene and Steve Aisenberg tucked their 3 children, William 8, Monica 4, and 5-month-old Sabrina, into the bed for the night at their Valrico home in Florida. At 6 a.m. the following morning, Marlene woke up and went into her kitchen. She was surprised to find the laundry room door to the garage was open. After getting William out of bed, she ran over to Sabrina's room and found that she was missing from her crib. She had vanished without a trace, along with her blanket. There were no witnesses, no sounds, no signs of forced entry into a family's home. The case shocked the local community, and the police knew they had to find her kidnapper quickly, so a massive search began for her. Investigators discovered that the Aisenbergs had left their garage door open overnight. The interior door may have also been left unlocked. Despite finding an unidentified shoe print and a blonde hair in Sabrina's room that might have belonged to a kidnapper, suspicion fell onto Marlene and her husband Steve. However, they denied involvement in her disappearance. Police took several items from their home for FBI analysis, including her crib and bedding. During this time, the Aisenbergs made a public appeal for the safe return of Sabrina. Police and others thought the appeal was suspicious, along with a video of the Aisenbergs leaving their home smiling. It was taken one day after her abduction. In order to prove their innocence, they agreed to take a polygraph test. Marlene claimed that the police told her that the results were inconclusive and that they expected that because she was hysterical and crying. However, the sheriff's office has stated that her results were not inconclusive. They will not publicly state whether she passed or failed. Shortly after Sabrina vanished, the Aisenbergs hired an attorney. They felt like they had no choice, as they were considered suspects. The police have declined to comment on any possible evidence in the case. They claim that the Aisenbergs have not been very cooperative in it. Police didn't rule them out as suspects, but they have continued to maintain their innocence in Sabrina's disappearance. The police were very suspicious because there was no apparent sign of forced entry or no ransom demands. They became even more suspicious after the parents' press conference and the video of Marlene smiling. They were also suspicious of a video of Sabrina a few days before she vanished. To some investigators, it appeared that she had bruises on her face and a patch of hair missing from her head. However, the Aisenbergs denied any involvement in her disappearance. The Aisenbergs believed that Sabrina was abducted from her crib by someone who wanted a baby, but could not have their own. The case was televised on Unsolved Mysteries on the 2nd of April, 1999. In November 1999, Steve and Marlene were arrested and charged with conspiracy, lying to investigators, and giving false information about Sabrina's disappearance. Investigators claim to have recorded conversations between them, with Marlene saying, "The baby's dead and buried," and "It was found dead because you did it. The baby's dead no matter what you say, you just did it." Steve apparently said, "I wish I hadn't harmed her," and they don't know the truth, right? However, 2 years later, a judge dropped all the charges against them, claimed that the prosecutors misrepresented the strength of the case. The alleged statements from the recorded conversations appeared to be too garbled to be understood. The US attorney agreed to reimburse the Aisenbergs for the cost of their legal counsel. In April 2003, police began to suspect that an unidentified girl named Paloma Unknown, who was abandoned in Mexico 5 years earlier and raised in Illinois, was Sabrina. DNA testing, however, confirmed that they were not the same person. Paloma remains unidentified, and Sabrina remained missing. An age progression photo of Sabrina was made public to give an idea what she may have looked like as a young woman. In 2017, a woman contacted the Aisenbergs through Facebook, believing that she might be Sabrina. She said she couldn't find any records or photos to document the first 5 months of her life, and she apparently bears a resemblance to Aisenberg's 2 other children. DNA testing is currently being done by a private lab to determine if she is Sabrina. Another woman has also come forward, believing that she is Sabrina. DNA testing is being done with her as well. No results have yet been released. To this day, the case remains unsolved.